My name's Sarah. I'm 17, a junior at St. James High, which is this massive brick building in the middle of nowhere. Everyone at school knows me as the quiet one, the girl who never really gets involved in drama. But after what happened with Mr. Grant, the new math teacher, I can't escape the attention, and it's the kind no one wants. Math has always been my worst subject, so when Mr. Grant offered me extra help, I thought it was a stroke of luck. He was new, fresh out of college, or so he said. He didn't act like the other teachers. There was this odd, intense energy about him, like he was studying us instead of teaching. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but soon I learned how wrong I was. It started small. I'd stay after class to go over formulas, and he'd praise me in this almost creepy, over-the-top way, calling me exceptional, even though I wasn't doing that well. Then, one day after a session, he handed me a quiz with answers scribbled on the back in his handwriting. I looked up, confused. "Consider it a head start," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I felt weird about it, but I took the quiz, thinking maybe he just really wanted me to succeed. But then it happened again, and the answers got more detailed, almost like he wanted me to cheat. When I asked him about it, he leaned in close and said, "Some students need a little push to reach their potential." One night, while I was leaving the classroom, I saw a black notebook on his desk with the names of several students in our year, including mine. Next to each name was a grade and notes in short clipped phrases. Motivated, good under pressure, weak. I felt my stomach turn when I noticed some names with a black X by them. Some of those students had mysteriously dropped out, or so we thought. No one ever talked about them again, like they'd never even existed here. I brushed it off, trying to focus on passing the class. But soon other students started noticing changes too. A friend of mine, Ellie, came to me looking pale and shaken. She said Mr. Grant had threatened to help her too and implied he knew things about her, secrets she'd never told anyone. It was like he had an invisible hand around her, controlling her every move. Then rumors started spreading around school. Secrets. Stuff about Ellie and me. Personal things only close friends would know. I hadn't told anyone but my mom about my dad leaving last year, but suddenly people were whispering about it in the hallways. I didn't know who to trust, and it all pointed back to Mr. Grant. I confronted him one afternoon. I waited until everyone had left and slammed the notebook on his desk. "What's this, Mr. Grant? Are you blackmailing us?" He just looked at me with that same empty smile and said, "I'm giving you what you need, Sarah. You're just too naive to understand that yet." His tone was icy, and the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. "You could be one of my best students if you just let me help you." I wanted to leave, but his eyes were fixed on me, unblinking. I could feel my heart racing, like I was trapped in some twisted game. Finally, I forced myself to turn and walk out, but I knew it wasn't over. The next morning, the whispers grew louder. Someone had posted a photo of my journal entry online, a journal I kept in my bag, one that no one should have known about. The entry was personal, revealing my insecurities about school and family. I felt sick to my stomach, realizing just how far he'd go to control me. I had to do something, so I reported him to the principal. They listened, but nothing came of it. The next day, Mr. Grant was gone. His desk was cleared out, and no one mentioned him again. It was like he'd never existed. Things quieted down after he left, but it left this permanent mark on me. I kept to myself even more, paranoid about who might be watching. Months went by, then years, and I eventually moved on, graduating and moving out of town. But it didn't end there. Just last week, I was browsing online when I came across a random link to a school forum. Curious, I clicked on it. There, in an old post about teachers, I saw a photo of my junior year class. And there, right in the back, was a faint image of Mr. Grant, standing behind us, looking right at me. Underneath the photo was a caption in dark, italicized letters. "I'll be seeing you." I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. I tried convincing myself it was just a prank or some horrible coincidence, but it felt all too real. Now every time I look over my shoulder, I half expect to see him lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting. And sometimes late at night I wonder if he's out there, still looking for his next student. Because if he found me once, who's to say he won't come back for more? I'm Mia, 17 years old, a junior at a small high school in Nebraska. I'm not exactly popular, but I have my small circle of friends, and I try to keep out of trouble. But the night I got paired with Leon for a chemistry project changed everything. And no matter how much I try to forget it, that night haunts me like a nightmare I can't wake up from. Leon was a quiet kid. Strange, intense, the kind of person you'd avoid. He didn't talk to anyone, never joined groups. and had this unsettling look about him, always watching, but never saying a word. So when Mr. Johnson paired us up for a chemistry project, I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know much about Leon, but something about him always felt wrong. We were supposed to work on the project after school, and it turned out Leon insisted we meet in the chemistry lab after hours. I arrived just as the sun was setting and Leon was already there, waiting, his face half hidden in the dim lab light. I sat down, trying to keep things casual, but there was this weird energy in the room, thick and heavy, like I could almost feel it pressing down on me. As we started working, Leon barely spoke, his eyes locked on the experiments. Then he left for a moment, muttering something about grabbing supplies from the storage room. Left alone, I noticed an open file on the table. Curiosity got the best of me, and I glanced at the papers scattered across it. What I saw made my skin crawl. The pages were filled with detailed notes on poisons and something he called fear endurance. Next to the notes were names of students, all labeled with things like reaction, heart palpitations, response, severe anxiety, and status failed. I recognized some of the names as students who'd mysteriously collapsed or transferred out, and a chill ran down my spine. I flipped to another page, finding sketches of syringes and chemicals, all with dosage amounts scrawled beside them. At the very bottom, underlined in bold, was my name, with today's date beside it. My hand started to shake. My heart was pounding so loudly that I didn't hear Leon come back into the room until he was right behind me. I froze, clutching the papers, feeling his cold gaze on my back. "Find something interesting?" His voice was calm, too calm. He walked around the table, his eyes locking onto mine with a look that made my blood run cold. "You weren't supposed to see that, but maybe this makes things easier." I tried to stay calm, to act like I hadn't seen anything, but my voice came out shaky. What? What is all this, Leon?" He shrugged almost casually, like it was no big deal. "An experiment. I want to see how fear affects survival." He took a step closer. Too close. "You're my next subject, Mia." I felt trapped, my body screaming to run, but I forced myself to stay still. Why me?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Because you're ordinary, unremarkable," he said, his tone almost mocking. "I want to see if fear changes that." Every fiber of my being told me to run, and I finally bolted, pushing past him and dashing down the hallway. I could hear his footsteps following me, slow and steady, like he knew he'd already won. I raced to the principal's office, pounding on the door until the principal opened up. I tried to explain, but my words were a mess of panic and fear. Thankfully, he took me seriously and followed me back to the lab. But when we got there, the room was empty. The files, the notes, everything was gone, like it had never been there. The principal tried to calm me down, but I could tell he didn't believe me. He said maybe I was stressed or imagining things. I tried to convince myself that I was safe now, that it was over. But since that night, strange things have been happening. I started seeing faces in the hallways, familiar faces of students who had been on that list. Their expressions were blank, hollow, like they were watching me. I'd catch glimpses of them in my bedroom mirror, their eyes dark, accusing. Some nights, I wake up with my heart racing, feeling like someone is in the room, standing just out of sight. I can't shake the feeling that Leon's still out there, watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. And each day the faces grow closer, the shadows darker. Sometimes I wonder if I really did escape that night, or if I'm still part of his twisted experiment. And the scariest part? I don't know if it'll ever end. My name's Aubrey, and I'm 16, a sophomore at Hillside High. I've always been quiet and observant, but lately I've noticed things that make my skin crawl. It started with strange scratches on the lockers about a month ago. At first I thought they were random marks, like scratches from a sharp edge, but soon I realized they weren't random at all. Every morning, a new symbol appeared, always scratched onto the locker of a specific student. The symbols weren't obvious, just small triangles with an X through them, almost like a hidden code. At first I thought nothing of it until Kyle, a quiet guy in my history class, didn't show up for school one day. I remembered he'd had one of those marks on his locker the week before he disappeared. Then it happened again with other students. Sarah, Dylan, Lucy, each of them had one of those strange marks, and each of them went missing within days. No one talked about it. People just assumed they transferred or dropped out. But I knew something was wrong. My curiosity turned into a sickening dread. I started tracking the symbols, trying to figure out a pattern, but all they seemed to do was point toward an old supply closet at the far end of the school. One night I decided to stay after school to investigate. I waited until the halls were empty, and then I made my way to the closet. The door was old and creaked as I opened it, revealing a small dark room with papers taped to the walls. My stomach twisted as I looked closer. Each paper was a description of a student, their schedules, their habits, even their fears. It was like reading a twisted diary, each page carefully tracking the lives of the students who had gone missing. One page described Kyle, detailing how he liked to walk home alone, unnoticed by everyone. Another was about Sarah, mentioning her fear of the dark and how she never stayed after school alone. Each paper seemed like a record, a chilling catalog of their last days. My heart raced as I scanned the pages, realizing someone had been watching them, studying them before they disappeared. Suddenly, I heard a soft shuffling outside the closet. I held my breath, trying to stay as silent as possible. The footsteps were slow, unhurried, and I felt trapped. There was nowhere to hide, and every instinct in me screamed to run. I forced myself to stay calm, but my heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I shoved the door open and ran down the hall, not daring to look back. My legs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. I convinced myself it was all just a strange, horrible coincidence and tried to forget about it. But the next morning when I got to my locker, I froze. Scratched into the door was the same symbol, the triangle with an X. My hands were shaking as I touched it, realizing that it was marking me, just like it had marked the others. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I stared at it, not knowing what to do. I tried to report it to the principal, but he just shrugged it off as a prank. Since then, every day has felt like a countdown. I keep my head down, but I feel eyes on me like I'm being watched. I've tried to convince myself that whoever did this is gone, that they've forgotten about me. But deep down, I know they haven't. Each night I lie awake waiting for something to happen. I don't know if it's all in my head or if the person who left those marks is still out there, waiting to finish what they started. And every time I walk by the lockers, I catch a glimpse of those faint, scratched symbols, wondering if they're a warning. I don't know how long I have left, or if I'll end up like the others, just another name no one remembers, disappearing without a trace. And the scariest part? No one else seems to notice.